is going on, y'all? Welcome to another episode of King Jing Sports Things. I am your host, King Jing, and today I want to talk about the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks have been one of my favorite teams over the past few years. Giannis Antetokounmpo is probably my favorite player in the NBA right now, besides LeBron James. And this team is just a couple years removed from an NBA championship. But now, a couple years later, this team is looking older. They're dealing with more injuries, and they are struggling to stay atop the Eastern Conference, which, is just historically weaker than the Western Conference. Their two star players in Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard, they're both in their 30s now. And the supporting cast that used to be the model supporting cast in the NBA, they're starting to show some cracks. So that got me thinking, is it time for the Bucks to go ahead and blow it up and start it all over? Or do we think there are certain things that we can tweak and, they'll be able to make another run at the title? Let's get into it. So I wanted to start out this video by talking about the salary cap situation that the Milwaukee Bucks have found themselves in. Currently, the Milwaukee Bucks sit at the sixth highest payroll in the NBA, while the record is only 40-30. That would be the sixth best record in the Eastern Conference, but in the entire landscape of this NBA, they're sitting at the 12th best record, and that is not necessarily what you want to see with a top six in terms of roster salary. You want to see a little bit better than that. So first, we're going to talk about the big three for the Milwaukee Bucks, which would be Giannis Antetokounmpo, Damian Lillard, and Kyle Kuzma. Now, Kyle Kuzma isn't really a big factor in this. He's making $24 million this year, but over the next 2 years, his contract actually declines $2 million per year. So next year, he's only making $22 million, and the year after that, he's making $20 million. Now, personally, I really like that contract. I like the fact that it's declining in value, and that'll probably be a valuable contract that the Bucks will want to have on that roster just because he's not making that much. I'm more focused on the Giannis and Dame aspect of the salary cap. They're both currently making $48 million, almost $49 million. And then next year, they all for paying the former MVP, the head of your team, clear number one guy, Giannis, $54 million. What I don't like is the fact that they're having to pay Damian Lillard $54 million going into next year, and then he has a player option that following year for $58.5 million. Now, I believe in July, Dame is going to be turning 35, and we haven't necessarily seen a decline in play just yet. But you know how point guards get when they get over that 35, 36 mark. They start to slow down a little bit. That athleticism is not necessarily the same as it used to be. And, we can tell that regression is on the horizon. Now you want to look at their next, four players who are coming off the books this offseason. You have Brook Lopez, Jericho Sims, Taurean Prince, and Gary Trent Jr. All have huge roles in their lineup currently. Brook Lopez is going to be coming off the books. He has $23 million, and the other three all have contracts for $2 million. So if you decide to bring none of them back, you have about $28 million to work with. I'm going to assume that they're going to bring Brook Lopez back. He has done wonders for their offense, especially considering he's able to open up the floor a little bit, create a little bit more space with his three-point shot. So I assume they'll end up bringing him back for maybe something a little bit less than that. We'll say in the $15 million range. So that leaves you with $13 million to work with. That's not a lot in today's NBA. Now, you also have three other players, all with player options this offseason. Bobby Portis, Pat Connaughton, and Kevin Porter Jr. all have these player options. None of them have necessarily been outplaying it, their current contracts. So I'm expecting them all to pick up those options. So I wouldn't anticipate any extra room to work with in terms of their salaries. Now, it doesn't help that the team is also paying two other head coaches that they fired within the last 2 years. It doesn't affect the salary cap for how much you're willing to spend on players for your roster, but I do believe that it probably has some effect on the ownership group wanting to cross that first floor in the salary cap, and then the second apron as well. You're currently paying Doc Rivers $10 million. You fired Coach Bud 2 seasons ago, and you're still paying him. I believe he's making $8 million. And then you fired Adrian Griffin not even a quarter into the season. He's making $4 million. All I'm saying is that the financial commitments are not necessarily translating to on-court success, and that is obviously a huge problem for the Milwaukee Bucks. So the second point that I wanted to touch on today was the lack of postseason success that we've seen from the Milwaukee Bucks. Obviously, in the 2020-2021 season, they won the title. Giannis wins Finals MVP, breaks a 50-year curse for that franchise. Good on them, but you can't just live in 2020-2021 for the rest of your life. You gotta move on. You gotta see what else you can do as a team. So that very next year, they end up beating the Chicago Bulls in the first round, which was no surprise to anybody. The Milwaukee Bucks were heavily favored for that franchise for that series. But then the very next series in the second round, they end up losing to the Boston Celtics. Hey, that's fine. Boston Celtics are a great team. They ended up winning the title last year. Shouldn't beat yourself up over that. Let's go on to the next season. Just regroup, retool. Let's see what we can do. The Bucks end up meeting the Miami Heat in the first round, and they lose. That was another series that they were heavy favorites of winning, but they came up short. But hey, the Heat are a feisty team. A couple people had called that the Heat could win that series. Whatever. Like I said, let's rebuild, let's retool, and you got to look at the next year. Next season rolls around. Bucks have a pretty dominant regular season. They make it to the playoffs, and they meet the Indiana Pacers in the first round. Once again, it's another series that they are heavy, heavy favorites of. And they fall short. Again. And this is a team with two of the greatest offensive players that I personally have seen in my lifetime in Giannis and Dame. I mean, Giannis is probably the most dominant player since Shaquille O'Neal that I have seen with my own two eyes. And Mr. Dame Time himself. He's won Clutch Player of the Year. Whole watch thing. Haven't been seeing much of that. And currently, the Milwaukee Bucks have the 17th highest offensive efficiency, with two of the most dominant offensive players that we have ever seen. How are they not winning games? How are they not pushing past the first round against the Pacers, a very, very young team that obviously the Bucks had plenty of more experience, more leadership, more seniority. They have been there before. And you lose in the first round. And, that has rubbed a lot of analysts the wrong way, a lot of fans the wrong way, to where now I feel like a lot of people aren't even considering themselves as a competitive team. They're not contenders this year. And if they're not contenders, then what does Giannis have? Like, why would Giannis want to stay around? So since they are not a competitive team, why would Giannis want to stay? Now that leads us to the most important domino in all of this, which is, does Giannis want to stay in Milwaukee? Now, going into this season, I would say the biggest point of emphasis was proving to Giannis that the Milwaukee Bucks can be a true contender. Not just dominant during the regular season, but also dominant during the postseason. And unfortunately, I don't think this season could have gone any worse. Giannis has gone on the record multiple times stating his desire to win, but he's also stated that no one is safe, not even him. And that started to come out after Luka got traded to the Lakers. Giannis said in a post-game interview back in February that sometimes players make the mistake of staying with one franchise for a little bit too long, and that no one should fall into their comfort zone. If you fall into that comfort zone, you're not doing what's best for the team. You're not making the necessary moves. You're becoming too friendly with all of your teammates. And, you know, that's how we end up seeing his best friend on the team, Chris Middleton, get traded to the Wizards for a Kyle Kuzma. But the most eye-raising quote so far came after that Luka trade when he says, quote, "You know what? I want Luka to the Lakers. I want Jokic to the New York Knicks. I want all the Europeans to go to all the big markets to see something incredible," end quote. And he even went on to say that it was his dream. Now, the question here is, was he implying that he wanted to go to a bigger market, that he wanted to get his name out there beyond just the Milwaukee Bucks? It seems as though as Giannis wants him and all the other European superstars in this league to go to these bigger markets, to have a bigger name for themselves. Now, Giannis in the past has stated plenty of times that as long as the Bucks are continuously competing for a championship, all is good on his end. You know, no need to trade me. No worries that I'm going to request a trade. And he's also gone on the record by saying that he is not the type of person that might request a trade, that might go to the front office and say, hey, send me to the Knicks. Hey, send me to the Lakers. And that the Bucks would literally need to kick him out if they wanted to see him in another jersey. But if the Bucks see another first-round exit, then personally, I'm not going to be surprised if Giannis's tone starts to change. All of this to say that it might be a little bit premature to just blow up this roster. They are obviously still somewhat competitive. Like, they have a winning record. This situation could be a whole lot worse than it actually is. But this season may have taught us that it might be time to do a significant overhaul of this roster in order to address any of their current struggles. I mentioned a little bit earlier about the salaries. The only two salaries that you can really trade if you want to make a massive move, big tweak to the roster, it's going to be Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Personally, if I'm the Milwaukee Bucks, I'm not trading the perennial MVP candidate. So that only leaves Damian Lillard. But the question is, are there any teams out there who is going to be willing to trade for an aging point guard who is making $54 million? Now, I'm going to let you know, as somebody who has been thinking of hypothetical trades that the Atlanta Hawks could do to trade Trae Young and sort of rework their roster, let me tell you, there's not many point guard needy teams out there at the moment. How many point guard needy teams are going to want to pay a 35-year-old $54 million? There's not many, if none at all. So I'm pretty certain that Damian Lillard will be staying on this roster for the foreseeable future. And that's the problem. Because the chemistry between Giannis and Dame has always been questionable. On paper, yeah, they seem like they should be the perfect pair. And that's just not what we've seen on the court. Regardless of what Giannis wants to tell the media. I believe a couple weeks ago, Giannis went out and said, hey, you know how you're questioning mine and Damian's chemistry? I believe that we have gelled quicker than we did when I had Chris Middleton on the roster. And that was his best friend. Recently, there's also been a report that came out about a post-game meeting between Giannis, Dame, and Doc Rivers, which, like I said, reported was said to be a positive conversation. It was just a conversation about what the team can do to head in the right direction, to be a competitive team in the playoffs that's coming up. Now, I believe it was the very next game at a post-game media scrum, Dame said that the team needed to be more aggressive offensively, but they needed to stay intentional. To me, that means very clean basketball, none of this pickup game mentality, running plays, running high screens, very intentional. Not even 10 minutes after Damian stepped off that stage, Giannis goes up there. And I believe he's asked about the very same question. Giannis says that he believes the Bucks need to be free-flowing on offense. Free-flowing, intentional. Polar opposites. And that just proves that they are not gelling and that they are not on the same page. Personally, I wouldn't want to trade Giannis, but it's gotten to the point where maybe that's a conversation that the front office needs to have with him to see what the next step in this evolution of this team is going to be. What do you think? Appreciate you guys stopping by. Please remember to like and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more content like this. I appreciate you guys, and I'll talk to you next time.